The fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls of the Montana ranch house. Outside, November snow fell silent and thick, blanketing the valley in white. Inside, warmth. Inside, memory. Tom Caldwell sat in his leather chair, worn smooth by decades of use. At 65, his shoulders still carried the breath of a working man, though time had softened the edges. Gray threaded through his hair. Deep lines mapped his face like the trails he'd walked. But his eyes, those sharp blue eyes, still held the keen awareness of a man who'd lived by watching, by noticing what others missed. On his lap rested a wool shawl, faded blue, with two distinct patterns stitched into the fabric. One pattern showed delicate flowers, precise and feminine. The other displayed geometric shapes, stronger lines, bolder stitches. Two women, two stories, one family. His grandson James sat cross-legged on the braided rug, 12 years old and full of questions. The boy had his grandfather's eyes, that same piercing blue that seemed to see more than it should. "Grandpa, why do you keep that old shawl in the trunk? It's just wool." Tom's fingers traced the overlapping patterns, feeling the texture of memory woven into thread. Just wool. A smile touched his weathered face. "Boy, this belonged to two women. Your grandmother Sarah, who I lost, and your grandmother Eliza, who I found. Or maybe she found me. Hard to say who rescued who." James leaned forward, firelight catching his eager face. "How'd you meet Grandma Eliza?" Tom stood slowly, the movements of a man who'd worked hard and earned his aches. He walked to the window, looking out at the snow. In the glass, his reflection merged with the darkness beyond, and for a moment he saw himself as he'd been. Young, strong, broken by loss, but not yet healed by love. "Let me tell you about the winter of 1876, about a stubborn woman who refused help, and about me learning that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is help someone who don't want it." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 3 decades past. "It started on November 8th, 3 days past Independence Rock. I'd been tracking a wagon for 72 hours straight. And when I finally caught up, the woman driving it looked at me like I would death herself come calling." The reflection in the window shimmered, and Tom's voice grew distant, falling into the cadence of storytelling, of remembering. "That's when I learned that pride and fear wear the same face, and that sometimes saving someone means refusing to let them die alone." The Wyoming prairie stretched endless in every direction, sagebrush and stone under a sky the color of old iron. Wind swept across the barren landscape, carrying the smell of snow, coming of winter arriving early and mean. The temperature had dropped through the afternoon, and now as the sun angled low, the cold bit with teeth. Tom Caldwell sat astride his chestnut mare Ruby, studying the ground with the focused intensity of a man trained to read stories in dirt and stone. Before him, wagon ruts carved deep into the hard-pan earth told a tale of struggle. The tracks weaved and wandered, correcting course only to drift again. One set of wheel marks dug deeper than the other, overloaded on the right side or a broken suspension. Either way, trouble. Every 2 miles the track stopped. Someone resting, someone hurt. And there on a flat stone beside the trail, a single drop of blood, rust brown and dried. Tom was 35 years old, built like a man who'd spent his life working with his hands and riding hard country. 6 feet 2 inches of weathered muscle and quiet strength. His face showed the marks of 10 years on the frontier lines carved by sun and wind. A scar on his jaw from a knife fight he'd barely won, eyes that had seen too much death and still searched for reasons to hope. He wore a buffalo coat against the cold, a cavalry hat pulled low, and a Colt Army revolver rode his right hip with the easy familiarity of an old friend. The Henry rifle in his saddle scabbard had saved his life more times than he cared to count. For 3 days, he'd followed these tracks, not from curiosity, from something deeper, instinct maybe, or the ghost of his wife Sarah's voice in his head, the one that still spoke to him in quiet moments, reminding him that helping others was what made them human. He'd been tracking because something about these wagon ruts spoke of desperation, and Tom Caldwell knew desperation. Had lived it for 3 years, ever since the day Sarah and their unborn son had slipped away from him, despite every prayer, every desperate bargain with God he'd tried to make. Now he crested a small rise, and there it was. The wagon sat 200 yards ahead, listing to one side like a ship taking water. canvas torn and flapping in the wind. Supplies scattered, one wheel gouged and damaged, but no movement, no smoke from a fire, no sign of life. Tom dismounted, leaving Ruby ground-tied. His hand found the Colt, not drawing it, but ready. Cavalry training never left a man. Always approach carefully. Always expect trouble. As he walked closer, the details emerged. The wagon was a disaster. Canvas ripped away on one side. Contents spilled across the ground, half buried in dust. The wheel wasn't just damaged, it was sabotaged. 3 spokes cut clean through the work of a blade not wear. Someone had done this deliberately, and then he saw her. A woman collapsed against the rear wheel, back to him, shoulders hunched forward. Dark hair escaped from a bun, tangled and wild. Gray wool dress caked with mud and darker stains. Her right hand was wrapped in what had once been white petticoat fabric, now soaked through with blood. Tom stopped 10 feet away. "Ma'am, you need help." She startled like a spooked horse whipping around. The movement cost her. She swayed, caught herself on the wheel with her left hand. Her right hand, the wounded one, hung useless at her side, dripping. Her face hit him like a fist to the chest. 30 years old, maybe. Thin in the way that spoke of missed meals and hard travel. Sharp cheekbones carved by hunger. Green eyes that burned with fever and fury and terror all mixed together. Lips cracked and bleeding, but underneath the dirt and pain and exhaustion, beautiful. Not the soft beauty of pampered women, but the hard beauty of someone who'd survived when survival wasn't guaranteed. "Stay back." Her voice came out hoarse but strong. A voice that had said those words before. A voice that expected to be ignored. Tom raised his hands, palms visible. "Easy, I'm not here to hurt you." "I said stay back." She tried to stand, stumbled, caught herself again. Pride keeping her upright when her body wanted to fall. Tom held position, reading her the way he'd read trail sign. Wounded hand infected by the smell even from this distance. Fever flush on her cheeks despite the cold. Dehydration clear in the cracked lips, the sunken eyes. Malnutrition in the way her clothes hung loose. 3 days, maybe 4, before the infection killed her. Less if she kept refusing help. "That hand needs tending," he said quietly. "You got infection." "I'm fine." "You ain't fine. You're dying, slow but certain." Her jaw set that stubborn angle he'd come to recognize. The angle that said she'd rather die than show weakness. "Don't you dare help me." Tom studied her for a long moment. He'd seen that look before. On soldiers after battles. On widows at poorhouses. The look of someone who'd survived by trusting no one and expected the world to prove them right every single time. He set his canteen on the ground beside her wagon wheel. Then a small bundle he'd prepared that morning, clean bandages, dried meat, a tin of salve his late wife Sarah had taught him to make. He placed them carefully like offerings at an altar of pride and stepped back. Not away, just back, enough to give her space to breathe. "Too late for that, ma'am," he said. His voice carried the weight of decision already made. Already decided. "I don't need your charity." Ain't charity. He glanced at the sky, at the dark clouds building west. "Out here helping each other is just good sense. Trail's got enough ways to kill a person without us adding stubbornness to the list." She glared at him, this fierce wounded woman who'd rather die than accept kindness. But she didn't pick up the supplies. Didn't move except to steady herself against the wheel. Tom turned, walked back to Ruby, swung into the saddle. He rode north 100 yards to a spot sheltered by rock outcrop and made his camp. Close enough to watch, far enough to let her pretend she was still alone. Behind him, she remained frozen by her broken wagon hand, bleeding, fever burning, watching him with eyes that couldn't decide if he was savior or threat. The supplies sat untouched beside her wheel. From his camp, Tom built a fire high and bright. He had his daughter Maggie to care for, but tonight he kept watch on that distant wagon. Kept watch on a woman who'd die before asking for help. And he wondered what had broken her so badly that kindness looked like danger. Maggie sat on the tailgate, legs swinging. 7 years old, small and delicate with dark curls and her father's blue eyes. She wore a cornflower dress Tom had sewn, himself crooked stitches but warm and oversized boy's boots stuffed with newspaper. "Did you find her, Pa?" Tom unsaddled Ruby, his movements automatic after years of practice. "Found her." "Is she coming?" "Don't know yet." Maggie hopped down from the tailgate, helping him carry the saddle to their camp. She was tiny but strong. Had to be. Life didn't give you the choice out here. Together they worked, no words needed. Tom built the fire while Maggie gathered kindling from the sparse brush. Tom set up their small tent while Maggie fetched water from the canteen. Tom started cooking while Maggie arranged their tin plates and cups. A routine born of necessity, polished by repetition, powered by love. They ate in comfortable silence. Salt pork and hardtack softened in hot water. Not good, but filling. Tom had learned to cook after Sarah died, learned by burning things and trying again. Maggie had learned to eat what was offered and be grateful. As the stars emerged overhead, brilliant and cold, Maggie spoke again. "Why won't the lady let us help?" Tom poked at the fire, watching sparks spiral up into darkness. "How did you explain fear to a 7-year-old? How did you explain how loss could make you hard? Because she's scared, little bird." "Of what?" Tom looked toward the distant wagon where a weak fire now flickered. At least she'd managed that much. "Of needing someone and having them leave anyway." Maggie considered this with the gravity of a child who'd lost her mother too young. "That's sad." "Yeah, it is." "We won't leave her, will we, Pa?" Tom pulled his daughter close, felt her lean into his side. So small, so trusting. "No, bird, we won't." Later, after Maggie had fallen asleep in the wagon wrapped in quilts that still smelled faintly of Sarah's lavender soap, Tom sat by the fire with his rifle across his knees. He couldn't sleep. Hadn't slept well in 3 years, not since watching his wife fade despite every prayer, every plea. He kept watch on that distant fire. It was too small, wouldn't last the night. The woman had no idea how to conserve wood, how to bank coals for long burning. She was making mistakes, amateur mistakes, and the temperature was dropping fast. Around midnight, he saw something that made his blood run cold. 2 figures moving low and quiet toward her wagon. Men on foot approaching from the east. They circled her camp, examining, then melted back into darkness. Tom was on his foot instantly, cavalry reflexes taking over. He moved silent as smoke, using every scrap of cover closing the distance. Got within 50 yards, close enough to hear. 2 men horses tied somewhere beyond. They stood in the shadow of a rock formation, speaking low. The first voice was educated, cold. "She's the one. Brennan woman. Michael's sister." The second voice, younger, nervous. "You sure?" "I'm sure. Boss wants that Boulder Creek claim. She don't file by December 1st, it reverts to public domain." "What if she makes it?" "She won't. Look at that hand. Infection's setting in, weather's turning, and I weakened that wagon axle good. Nature'll do our work for us. And if it don't," a pause, then the cold voice again, "then we help nature along." Tom's hand tightened on the Henry rifle, his jaw set. These weren't random drifters. These were hired men, professionals. And they'd been sabotaging this woman, hunting her, waiting for her to die so they could steal her land. The men mounted up, rode south into darkness. Tom waited 20 minutes, making sure they were truly gone, then ghosted back to his camp. Maggie slept on peaceful. He added wood to their fire, checked his weapons, and settled in for a long night. Sleep wouldn't come anyway. It never did when he had decisions to make. The smart move was to ride on. Not his problem. He had Maggie to protect. Getting involved with land disputes and hired killers was asking for trouble he didn't need. But Sarah's voice in his head wouldn't quiet. That gentle, firm voice that had always pushed him to be better than his fears. "We help because we can, Tom. That's what makes us human." Tom looked at his daughter sleeping, then at the distant fire dying down to embers. That woman would freeze tonight. And even if she survived, those men would be back. "Damn it, Sarah," he whispered to the stars, to the memory of a wife 3 years dead. "You always knew how to get me into trouble." He stood, wrapped himself in his buffalo coat, and kept watch through the long, cold night. If those men came back, they'd have to go through him first. By dawn, he'd made his decision. He was staying, whatever it took. Because sometimes the only way to honor the dead was to fight for the living. November 9th arrived with a sky the color of old bruises. Tom woke to the smell of snow on the wind, that particular metallic taste that meant serious weather coming. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees overnight. His breath plumed white in the pre-dawn darkness. He checked on Maggie, still sleeping warm beneath her quilts, then saddled Ruby and rode toward the woman's camp. Her fire was dead. No movement. For a terrible moment, he thought she'd died in the night. Then he saw her, slumped against the wagon wheel in the exact same position as yesterday. She hadn't moved, maybe couldn't move. Tom dismounted, approached carefully. "Ma'am," no response. The infection had worsened overnight. What had been red streaks on her forearm yesterday now climbed past her elbow. The hand itself was unrecognizable, swollen black edge, reeking of rot even in the cold. "Ma'am, you need a doctor. Fort Bridger's 2 days south. I can get you there." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Don't need—" "Yeah, you do, and there's a storm coming. Big one." She tried to sit straight or failed. Her whole body trembled with the effort. "I'll manage." Tom knelt beside her, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her fevered skin. "No, you won't. You'll die out here alone because you're too proud to accept help." Tears tracked through the dirt on her face. "Why do you care?" The question hit harder than it should have. Why did he care? This woman was a stranger. Difficult, stubborn, likely to get him killed if those hired men came back. But he looked at her, really looked, and saw something he recognized. Saw loss, saw someone who'd been broken by the world and put herself back together with nothing but sharp edges and refusal to quit. "Because I can't stand by and watch someone die when I got hands that work and knowledge that helps." A gust of wind, colder, stronger. The sky darkened further. "Come with us," Tom said quietly, "to Fort Bridger. Get that hand treated. Then you can go wherever you're headed. I'm not asking for anything in return. Just let me help you stay alive." "I can't pay you, wow." "Didn't ask you to." "Why?" Tom stood, looked at the clouds amassing on the western horizon. How did you explain to a stranger that helping her was the first thing that had made him feel alive in 3 years? That maybe by saving her, he could start believing he was more than the man who'd failed to save his wife. "My wife died 3 years back. Childbirth. I couldn't save her no matter how hard I tried. But I can save you." Recognition flickered in her fevered eyes, understanding that they both carried the weight of the dead. But pride, that damn pride, still held her. "Thank you for the offer, but I'll manage." Tom wanted to argue, wanted to shake sense into her, but he'd been a scout long enough to know when words wouldn't work. He mounted Ruby, looked down at her. "When that storm hits, and it will in about 3 hours, my wagon's over there. Doors open." He rode back to camp, frustration tight in his chest. Maggie was awake, watching with those two knowing eyes. "She won't come, will she?" "Not yet." "What if she dies, am I—" Tom looked at his daughter, at the worry creasing her young face. "Then I'll have tried. That's all anyone can do." But it didn't feel like enough. The storm hit at 11 in the morning with the sudden violence of something alive and angry. One moment clear air, the next a wall of white. Tom had been ready. Everything secured, the wagon battened down, horses close and blanketed. He and Maggie huddled inside the wagon's small stove, burning blankets piled high. Through a gap in the canvas, Tom watched the world disappear. Visibility dropped to nothing. The wind shrieked like something dying. Temperature plummeted so fast the cold felt solid, a physical weight pressing down. And somewhere in that white hell, that stubborn woman was dying. "Pa." Maggie's voice was small, scared. "The lady's still out there. I know, Bird. She'll freeze." Tom's hands clenched. He'd offered help. She'd refused. It was her choice, her consequence. But that was a lie, and he knew it. This wasn't about choice anymore. This was about survival. And leaving her out there meant leaving her to die. Then he heard it, faint through the screaming wind. A crack sharp and sudden, canvas tearing. Then a scream, high and desperate. Maggie grabbed his arm. "Papa." Tom was already moving. He wrapped himself in the buffalo coat, tied a scarf around his face, grabbed his rope. "Stay here. Lock the tailgate. Don't open for anyone but me." "Papa, no." He cupped her face, looked into eyes that had already lost too much. "I'll be back, I promise." Then he pushed into the storm. The world became white, only white. Wind hit like a physical blow, trying to shove him down. Snow drove horizontal, stinging any exposed skin. He couldn't see, couldn't hear except for the wind, couldn't tell up from down. He tied one end of the rope around his waist, the other to the wagon frame. Lifeline. Then he pushed toward where her wagon should be, using memory and instinct, because sight was useless. 50 feet felt like 50 miles. Every step a battle against wind and cold, and the seductive whisper that said to just lie down, just rest, just stop fighting. But Tom Caldwell was cavalry, had fought Sioux and Cheyenne, had survived wounds that should have killed him, had endured 3 years of grief that nearly did. He kept moving. His hand hit something solid. Wagon wheel, her wagon half buried already. The canvas was gone, ripped away completely. Supplies scattered, freezing, lost. The wagon itself tilted dangerously on that sabotaged axle. But no woman. Terror spiked through him. Where then he saw movement. 20 feet away, a shape in the snow, someone crawling, reaching for something, the torn canvas, maybe trying to salvage anything. She collapsed face first into a drift. Tom ran, stumbled, reached her. He turned her over. Her face was blue, lips white, eyes closed, breathing. He couldn't tell in the chaos. No time to check, no time to think. He lifted her. She weighed nothing, just bones and wool wrapped in frozen cloth. He cradled her against his chest, wrapped the buffalo coat around them both, and followed his rope back. The rope. Thank God for the rope. Hand over hand, he hauled them both through the storm. She didn't move, didn't wake, just hung limp in his arms like something already dead. "Don't you die," he growled into the wind. "Don't you dare die after I came all the way out here to save your stubborn hide." The wagon appeared like a miracle. Maggie's face at the opening, terror and hope mixed together. "Help me." Together they got the woman inside. Tom climbed in, Maggie sealed the canvas. The storm's roar became muffled, bearable. Tom laid the woman on his bedroll. Her lips were bone white. Her skin felt like ice. "Blankets," he ordered. "All of them." Maggie scrambled, pulling quilts from storage. Sarah's quilts kept safe for 3 years. They spread them out, then Tom did what needed doing. He stripped the woman's frozen clothes. No time for modesty. Hypothermia killed fast. He worked quick but careful, preserving what dignity he could, wrapping her in dry wool. Then he pulled her close to the small stove. Heat. She needed heat, but it wasn't enough. The cold had gone too deep. "Body heat," he said. "It's the only way." Maggie understood without explanation. She'd helped save a freezing lamb once, same method. They sandwiched the woman between them, sharing warmth, willing life back into frozen flesh. Tom pressed his fingers to her throat, searching for a pulse. There, faint but there, a heart still beating. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on. You didn't survive this long just to quit now." The storm raged outside. Inside, 3 people huddled together. 2 living, one balanced on the knife edge between. Hours passed. Tom monitored her pulse, her breathing. Maggie held the woman's hand, the good one, singing soft songs Sarah used to sing. "Hush, little baby, don't you cry. Papa's gonna sing you a lullaby." Tom's eyes burned. To hear his daughter sing those words to this dying stranger, it was almost more than he could take. Around midnight, something changed. The woman's shivering stopped. Tom's heart seized. Death stopped shivering. But when he checked her breathing, it had deepened. Her pulse strengthened. Her skin still cool, but no longer ice. The fever that had been burning her before the blizzard was still there, but lower now. The cold had broken its spike. And her hand, that infected mess, he could finally tend it properly. Working by lamplight while she slept and the storm raged, Tom cleaned the wound. Used whiskey to sterilize. She gasped in her sleep but didn't wake. He cut away the dead flesh, the black and stinking tissue that would kill her if left. Applied the salve Sarah had taught him to make. Wrapped it in clean bandages, proper and tight. When he finished, gray dawn was seeping through the canvas. The storm had passed, leaving silence louder than the wind had been. Maggie slept curled against the woman's side, and the woman herself lay peaceful, breathing steady, fever broken alive. Tom slumped against the wagon wall, exhaustion crushing him. His hands shook. His whole body shook. He'd saved her. Against her will, against the storm, against infection and cold, and her own stubborn pride, he'd saved her. And now he had to figure out what came next. Because those men, those hired killers, they were still out there, still hunting. And now Tom had painted a target on himself and Maggie by getting involved. But looking at the woman sleeping, at her hand properly bandaged, at the color returning to her face, he couldn't regret it. Some things were worth the risk. Some people were worth saving, even when they didn't want to be saved. especially then. Tom woke to weak sunlight filtering through canvas gaps. His neck ached from sleeping propped against the wagon wall. His ankle throbbed where he'd twisted it during the rescue. Everything hurt, but they were alive. Maggie stirred first, blinking sleep away. She sat up carefully, not wanting to disturb the woman still sleeping beside her. "Pa," she whispered. "Is she okay?" Tom leaned forward, checked pulse and breathing, both strong. The woman's face had lost that dangerous flush, though her skin still carried pallor. But she'd live. "Yeah, Bird, she's okay." Maggie smiled relief, lighting her young face. "You saved her." "We saved her." The woman's eyes opened, confusion first disorientation. She looked at the unfamiliar wagon ceiling, at the child beside her, at the man watching with careful distance. Memory flooded back. Her eyes widened. She tried to sit up. "Easy," Tom said. "You nearly froze to death last night." She looked down at herself. Clean clothes. Bandaged hand. Understanding dawned, and with it embarrassment. I needed help. Finally got it, whether you wanted it or not." Tom moved to the stove, poured coffee from the pot he'd kept warm, handed her a tin cup. "Drink, then we'll talk." She accepted the cup with her left hand, the good one. Sipped. The coffee was strong, bitter, frontier style. She drank it anyway. Tom poured 2 more cups, gave one to Maggie, kept one for himself. They sat in silence, 3 people in a small space, the morning after surviving something that should have killed them. Finally, the woman spoke. Her voice came out rough from fever and cold and screaming into wind. "Thank you." 2 words, but they cost her something to say. Tom nodded. "You're welcome." "I didn't want—" "I know, but wanting and needing are different things." She looked at her bandaged hand, flexing the fingers carefully. They moved. Stiff and sore, but they moved. "You did this. Couldn't let infection kill you after the cold didn't. You're very skilled. My wife taught me, before she died." The woman's eyes met his, and he saw recognition there. Fellow traveler in grief. Someone who understood loss not as abstract concept, but as lived reality. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too." Maggie wiggled between them, breaking the heavy moment with a child's directness. "What's your name?" The woman blinked, surprised. "Eleanor. Eleanor Brennan, but most people call me Eliza." "I'm Maggie. That's my papa, Tom. Are you going to stay with us now?" Eliza looked at Tom, question in her eyes. Tom set down his cup. "We should look at your wagon, see what's salvageable." They ventured outside into a world transformed. Snow blanketed everything, 2 feet deep and sparkling in morning sun. Beautiful and deadly. The storm had buried the trail, erased landmarks, made the landscape alien. Eliza's wagon stood where they'd left it, but barely. The collapsed canvas was gone, completely torn away and lost. The cracked axle had given up entirely during the storm. The wagon sat at a crippled angle, one corner resting on the ground. Supplies scattered everywhere, half buried. Most would be ruined, flour wet and spoiled. Cloth frozen. Food gone to scavengers or buried too deep to find. Eliza walked around the wreckage silent. Her face showed nothing, but Tom saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw locked tight. This was everything she owned, everything she'd carried west. And now it was destroyed. She knelt by a half-buried trunk, brushed snow away. The trunk had survived, still latched. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside, wrapped careful in oilcloth papers. She lifted them out, unfolded them in the sunlight. A land deed. Tom could see it from where he stood. Official stamps in careful handwriting. Michael Brennan, Boulder Creek, Colorado Territory. 160 acres under Homestead Act of 1862. Eliza held the deed like it was made of glass. "My brother's land. He died 6 months ago. Left it to me." She looked up at Tom, and he saw everything in her face. This wasn't just paper. This was her last chance, her fresh start. The only thing she had left in the world. "There's a deadline," she said. "December 1st. If I don't file the claim in person by then, I lose it." Tom did quick math. Today was November 10th. 3 weeks, maybe 20 days in good conditions. "How far is Boulder Creek?" "Land office said 200 miles from Fort Bridger." Tom whistled low. 200 miles through mountain passes. In winter. With a woman recovering from infection and hypothermia. The smart thing was to wish her luck and ride away. Instead, he heard himself say, "Come with us." Eliza looked at him, surprise clear on her face. "We're heading to Fort Bridger," Tom continued. 2 weeks travel in this snow. We can get you there, get you resupplied. Then we'll figure out how to get you to Colorado before your deadline. That's weeks out of your way. My ranch is in Montana, another 2 weeks north from Colorado. I add 2 weeks to my trip, that's all. I can't pay you, Tom's jaw tightened. Didn't ask you to. This isn't about money. Then what's it about? He looked at Maggie standing quiet and listening. Looked at this woman who'd almost died rather than accept help. Looked at the vast white landscape that killed without mercy or care. It's about survival. Yours and maybe ours too. Been just me and Maggie for 3 years. We manage. But managing ain't the same as living. He paused. You need help reaching Colorado. And maybe we need you too. Someone else to think about. Someone else to matter. Eliza studied his face for a long moment. You know there are men after me. After this land. I heard them talking one night. Pike brothers they called themselves. They'll kill to stop me from filing that claim. I know. I heard them too. Her eyes widened. You knew and you still helped. Yeah. Tom shrugged. Maybe I'm tired of playing it safe. Maybe I'm tired of just surviving. Or maybe I just can't stand by and watch someone die when I can do something about it. The wind picked up swirling snow around their feet. What if we fail? Eliza asked. What if I don't make the deadline? Then we tried. That's more than you had yesterday. Eliza looked at the papers in her hands, her brother's legacy, then at Tom and Maggie, this strange family offering help when she'd spent so long refusing it. Finally, she folded the papers, put them back in the trunk. Only to Fort Bridger. Okay? I mean it. Just Fort Bridger. Then I find another way. Understood. And I earn my keep. I'm not a passenger. I didn't figure you would be. Eliza stood, extended her left hand. The right was still bandaged, healing. Partners. Tom shook her hand, felt the calluses, the strength despite her small frame. Partners. Behind them, Maggie cheered. She's staying, Papa. She's staying. For the first time, Eliza smiled, a small smile, cautious and uncertain but real. I suppose I am. They spent the next 2 hours salvaging what they could. Tom fashioned a sled from broken wagon boards to drag supplies. Eliza sorted through frozen goods, finding what might still be useful. Maggie helped tie bundles, her small hands quick and capable. By noon, they'd loaded Tom's wagon with both their supplies, cramped but manageable. Tom helped Eliza onto the driver's bench. She sat stiff, uncomfortable with accepting help, but she sat. Maggie squeezed between them, chattering excitedly about everything and nothing. Tom clicked the horses forward. As they pulled away, Eliza looked back one last time at her broken wagon, at the scattered remains of her solo journey west. Then she looked forward at the trail ahead, at the man driving and the child bouncing between them. I plan to do this alone, she said quietly. Tom kept his eyes on the trail. Alone's not always strongest. Sometimes it's just loneliest. They traveled in silence for a while, the wagon creaking through fresh snow. 3 people who'd been strangers yesterday, now bound together by storm and stubbornness, and the simple act of not letting someone die. Behind them, 2 riders sat their horses on a distant ridge, watching. Vernon Pike lowered his spyglass. She survived, and she's got help now. Silas Pike shifted, nervous in his saddle. What do we do? Vernon's scarred face showed nothing. We wait. We watch. Trails long between here and Colorado. Lots can happen on a long trail. And they turned their horses and disappeared into the white landscape, patient as wolves. Ahead, unaware of the watchers, Tom and Eliza and Maggie rolled toward an uncertain future. Together. Sometimes Tom thought the hardest thing to accept was the help you needed most. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let someone in, even when every scar you carried screamed to stay closed. He glanced at Eliza, saw her jaw set with determination, saw Maggie lean against her like she'd known this woman her whole life. And for the first time in 3 years, Tom Caldwell felt something dangerous blooming in his chest. Hope. The first 3 days on the trail passed in careful politeness, the kind that exists between strangers forced into proximity. Tom drove the wagon. Eliza sat beside him, spine straight, hands folded in her lap, careful not to touch. Maggie filled the space between them with her endless questions and observations, a bridge neither adult knew how to build themselves. The land rolled endlessly in every direction, white and treacherous. The trail was buried under snow, visible only by the occasional marker stone or the intuition that came from years of reading landscape. Tom navigated by sun position and memory by the shape of distant mountains and the way water flowed in frozen creeks. Progress was slow, 15 miles a day if they were lucky. The horses labored through drifts, breaking trail with their broad chests. The wagon creaked and groaned heavy with double supplies. But they moved forward, and that was what mattered. Each evening they made camp with the efficiency of people who understood that wasted motion meant wasted warmth. Tom would scout ahead, find shelter behind rock formations or in the lee of small hills. Eliza would start gathering what sparse firewood existed while Tom unhitched the horses. Maggie would set up their small camp, arranging blankets and supplies with the practiced ease of a child who'd grown up on the trail. They worked around each other like dancers who'd never practiced together, but somehow knew the steps. Tom reaching for the coffee pot at the same moment Eliza did, both pulling back with mumbled apologies. Eliza moving to help with the horses only to find herself in Tom's path, the two of them doing an awkward sidestep while Maggie giggled. Meals were quiet affairs. Tom cooked simple food, nothing fancy but edible. Salt pork fried until crisp, beans slow cooked in a pot, hardtack softened in bacon grease. Frontier food designed for survival, not pleasure. On the third evening, Maggie broke the silence that had become their habit. "Miss Eliza, where are you from?" Eliza looked up from her tin plate, surprised by the direct question. "Ohio, a little town called Marietta, right on the river." "That's far away." "Very far. Did you come all by yourself the whole way?" Eliza set down her fork. Her eyes grew distant. "Yes, since Independence, Missouri. That's where the wagon trains form up." Tom stopped eating, attention caught despite himself. "That's 800 miles, alone." "I managed." The simple words carried weight. Tom heard what she didn't say. The terror, the close calls, the nights lying awake in a wagon clutching a pistol, jumping at every sound. 800 miles of that would break most men. This woman had done it and survived. "That takes grit," he said quietly. Eliza met his eyes across the fire. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition. Respect. "Thank you," she said. That night, when they arranged sleeping positions, Tom gave up his usual spot in the wagon without comment. He took his bedroll and slept outside by the fire, giving Eliza privacy to share the wagon with Maggie. It was the proper thing, the gentlemanly thing, even if it meant sleeping colder. Eliza didn't comment, but he saw her face soften slightly when she climbed into the wagon. Progress in its own small way. The fourth day brought warmer weather, relatively speaking. The temperature climbed into the 40s, and the ice began to melt, turning the trail into churned mud. The wagon wheels sank deep, and the horses strained against the added resistance. Eliza watched Tom fight the reins for an hour before speaking. "Let me drive for a while. Give your hands a rest." Tom glanced at her, surprise clear. "You know how to handle a team." "My father taught me, before he died." Tom handed over the reins without argument. His hands were raw, cracked, and bleeding from the constant pressure of leather against skin. They needed the break, whether he'd admit it or not. Eliza took the reins with her left hand, the right still bandaged, though healing well. Her touch was firm, confident. She clicked her tongue, and the horses responded, leaning into their traces. Tom watched her work. Her hands were steady, neither too loose nor too tight. She read the horses' signals, giving them their head on easy ground, holding them firm when the trail turned treacherous. She knew what she was doing. "Your father taught you well," he said after a mile of watching. Eliza's expression softened at the mention. "He was a good teacher. Died when I was 16. After that, it was just me and my mother until I married." She didn't elaborate and Tom didn't push. But another piece of her story fell into place. She'd been surviving on her own for a long time, longer than just this journey west. That afternoon, they stopped to rest the horses by a frozen creek. While Tom chipped through the ice to reach water beneath Aussie, Eliza took Maggie down to the creek's edge. Together, they examined the ice the way it formed in layers and patterns, the tiny bubbles trapped inside like frozen stars. "My mama used to show me ice patterns," Maggie said softly. "She said each one was different like people. Eliza knelt beside the child, heedless of the cold soaking through her skirt. She was right, and she was smart to teach you to notice them. Do you miss your mama? Every day. Me too, Maggie whispered. Tom, watching from 20 yards away, felt his throat tighten. His daughter rarely spoke of Sarah. The loss was too deep, too constant. But here she was, opening up to this near stranger, sharing grief with someone who understood. That evening, after Maggie fell asleep, when Eliza sat by the fire, the silence had transformed, less awkward now, more companionable. They didn't need to fill every moment with words. After a long while, Eliza spoke. Your daughter is remarkable. She's had to grow up fast. That's not what I mean. She's kind, genuinely kind. That doesn't come from just having to grow up. That comes from being raised right. Tom poked at the fire, uncomfortable with the praise. I do my best. But there's things a father can't teach, things she needs a mother for. She seems to be doing fine without one. Fine isn't the same as whole. Eliza pulled her shawl, the one Tom had given her, tighter around her shoulders. The blue wool was worn, but warm. None of us are whole. We're all just pieces trying to fit together. Tom looked at her across the flames. 2 weeks ago, she'd been all sharp edges and suspicion, a woman armored against the world. Now warmth had replaced wariness. The tension had left her shoulders. She was healing not just her hand, but her spirit. You lost a child, he said, not a question. Eliza's hands tightened on the shawl. How did you know? Something you said in the wagon. During the fever, you mentioned a baby. She was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then quietly, I was 3 months along when my husband Daniel died. The bank came a week later to take the farm. The stress, she stopped, swallowed. I lost the baby 2 days after that. I'm sorry. So am I. More silence. The fire crackled. A coyote howled somewhere distant. Sarah died in childbirth, Tom said, offering his own pain in return for hers, her and the baby both. A boy. I held him for 10 minutes before he stopped breathing. Then I held Sarah and watched her slip away, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it. Eliza's hand reached across the space between them, or it touched his arm briefly. The contact lasted only a moment, but it was the first time she'd initiated touch. The first time she'd offered comfort instead of just accepting it. I'm sorry, she said. Yeah, me too. They sat together and shared grief, two people who understood that some losses never healed, you just learned to carry them differently. On the 6th day, they reached the Snake River tributary crossing. Tom had been dreading this moment since they left the line shack. The river ran fast and high, swollen with snowmelt, the water dark and angry looking. He rode Ruby ahead to scout while Eliza drove the wagon. The crossing point was marked by cairns of stacked stones placed by previous travelers to show the safest ford. But safe was relative. The water was easily 3 feet deep at the center, maybe more. The current would be strong enough to push a wagon sideways if they weren't careful. Tom dismounted, walked the bank studying the approach and exit points. The bottom looked rocky, which was good, better traction than mud, but those rocks could also break an axle if they hit wrong. He pulled out a long stick and waded into the shallows, testing depth. The water was shockingly cold, even through his boots. By the time it reached his knees, his feet were going numb. At the deepest point, the water came to his thighs. Manageable for horses, risky for a loaded wagon with a child inside. He weighted back his legs, aching from the cold. Eliza had brought the wagon up to the bank. She stood looking at the rushing water, her face pale. How bad? She asked. Bad enough, but I've crossed worse. What do we do? Tom laid out the plan. They'd lighten the wagon, taking off anything heavy that wasn't essential. Cache it on this side, come back for it after. They'd waterproof the critical items, the land deed, the money, the ammunition, and store them in the elevated wagon box. Everything else got roped down tight. Most importantly, Eliza and Maggie would sit in the exact center of the wagon, away from the sides. If the wagon pushed, they'd need to get to the high side fast. If it goes bad, Tom said, meeting Eliza's eyes, you grab Maggie and get to shore. Don't wait for me. Don't try to save supplies. Just get to dry land. Tom, promise me. She held his gaze, reading the seriousness there. I promise. They spent an hour preparing. Tom checked every rope twice, every knot 3 times. He talked to the horses, Ben and Molly, running his hands along their necks, speaking in that low, calm voice that animals trusted. Finally, everything was ready. Eliza climbed into the wagon with Maggie. The child was frightened. Tom could see it in her wide eyes, but she was trying to be brave. "It's all right to be scared, Bird," he called to her. "I'm a little scared too, but we're going to be fine." Tom positioned himself on the driver's bench, reins in hand. He took a deep breath, said a quick prayer to whatever might be listening, and clicked his tongue. "Hup, Ben. Hup, Molly. Easy now." The horses stepped into the water. They flinched at the cold but kept moving, trusting their driver. The wagon followed wheels, hitting the current with a jolt. The water climbed the wheels, reached the axles, started seeping through gaps in the wagon bed. Cold water, shocking and numbing. Inside, Maggie gasped. Eliza wrapped an arm around her, holding tight. Tom kept his voice calm and steady. "It's just water, Bird. We're fine, just getting our feet wet." Ben and Molly leaned into their harnesses, fighting the current. The water pushed against the wagon broadside, trying to shove them downstream. Tom felt the wagon shift the wheels, losing purchase on the rocky bottom. "Hold, Ben, hold steady." The lead horse dug in hooves, scrambling for grip. For a terrible moment, the wagon tilted left, 10 degrees 15. Water poured over the side. Inside, Eliza shifted her weight right, pulling Maggie with her. The instinctive movement of someone who understood balance and physics. It was subtle, but it helped. The wagon stabilized just slightly. Tom felt the shift, glance back. Eliza's eyes met his over Maggie's head. Unspoken communication flowing between them. "We're doing this. Together." The horses found their footing again and pulled. The wagon lurched forward. The current was worst at midstream, where the channel ran deepest. This was the critical point. Ben stumbled, his front legs going down on slick rocks. The wagon jerked violently. "Ben, up, boy, up!" The horse scrambled, panic in his movements. Molly reared, slightly frightened by Ben's fear. Tom's hands were iron on the reins, every muscle in his body straining. His voice dropped to that cavalry command tone, the one that cut through panic and demanded obedience. "Ben, Molly, easy, easy." The horses heard him, heard the certainty in his voice. Ben regained his footing. Molly settled. Tom clicked his tongue, a sound of encouragement. "That's it. Good horses. Just a bit more. We're almost home." Step by step, they fought through the deepest water. The current battered them, tried to sweep them away, but the horses held firm and the wagon followed. 20 feet from the far bank. 15. 10. The wheels caught on the rocky slope and surged forward. The horses pulled hard, desperate for dry land. The wagon lurched up out of the water, dripping and creaking, but intact. They'd made it. Tom set the brake and slumped forward, his whole body shaking with released tension. His hands ached from the death grip on the reins. His heart hammered against his ribs. Behind him in the wagon, Maggie started laughing. Not frightened laughter, but the giddy release of someone who had been terrified and survived. "We did it. Papa, we did it." Eliza climbed out of the wagon. Her dress soaked, her hair wild, and she was smiling. Really smiling. The first genuine, unguarded smile Tom had seen from her. "That was incredible," she said. "The way you controlled the horses, the way you kept them calm. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen." Tom climbed down, his legs unsteady. "You shifting weight when the wagon tilted, that's what saved us." Quick thinking. "We saved us," Eliza said. Echo of what he'd told her days before. Tom looked at her, this woman who'd been a hostile stranger a week ago. In the afternoon sun, with water dripping from her dress and fury lighting her face, she was beautiful. Not despite the hardship, but because of it. Because she'd faced danger and come through stronger. "Yeah," he said quietly. "We did." Maggie splashed through the shallow water at the bank, laughing and spinning. "Can we do it again?" "Absolutely not," Tom and Eliza said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. It was a small moment, a nothing moment. But on that riverbank, everything changed. Partnership became friendship. Friendship became something neither was ready to name yet. That evening, after they'd made camp and dried out after Maggie had fallen asleep exhausted from the day's excitement, Tom and Eliza sat by the fire. "Back in Ohio," Eliza said suddenly. "After Daniel died, after I lost the baby, I made a decision. I decided I'd never need anyone again. Never be vulnerable. Never let anyone close enough to hurt me." She poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks rise. "I thought that was strength. I thought being alone meant being safe. And now, Tom asked? Now I think maybe I was just scared. And maybe being alone isn't strength. Maybe it's just loneliness wearing pride's coat. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. When Sarah died, I swore the same thing. Swore I'd never need anyone, never let anyone in. Just me and Maggie against the world. What changed? He looked at her across the flames. You. Watching you fight to survive. Watching you slowly learn to accept help. It made me realize I was doing the same thing. Surviving but not living. Tom, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm just saying that these last few days working together, it's made me feel alive again. Like I'm more than just a man going through motions. Eliza's eyes glistened in the firelight. I feel it too, and it terrifies me. Me too. They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them. Neither ready to say more, but both understanding that something was growing here, fragile and new, something that felt like hope. The trouble came on the 8th evening. They'd made good progress that day, nearly 20 miles. The weather had held, the trail had been clear, and spirits were high. Tom found them a good campsite sheltered by a semicircle of rock formations that blocked the wind and hid their fire from distant view. After dinner, while Eliza helped Maggie wash up for bed, Tom took his habit of scouting the perimeter. Old cavalry training never left. Always know your surroundings. Always check for threats. 50 yards from camp, he found them. Fresh horse tracks, multiple horses, at least 4, maybe 5. The tracks circled their camp in a wide loop, staying just out of sight, just out of hearing. Someone was watching them. Tom followed the trail. The tracks led to a spot where riders had stopped dismounted. He found cigarette butts still fresh, boot prints where men had stood for a while watching. One set of prints was distinctive. The left boot had a gouge in the heel, leaving a mark in the soft earth. They'd been here within the last few hours, while Tom and his family had been eating dinner, laughing unaware. He returned to camp, his face carefully neutral. Maggie was already in the wagon, settling down for sleep. Eliza was banking the fire for the night. She looked up as he approached and immediately read his expression. What's wrong? Tom glanced at the wagon, made sure Maggie couldn't hear. We've got company, not friendly. Eliza paled. Pike brothers. Has to be. 4 horses circling camp. They're tracking us. Why haven't they attacked? Tom had been wondering the same thing. Best guess, they're waiting for the right moment. Maybe waiting for us to get careless. Or maybe waiting for worse weather so it looks like we died natural. Eliza wrapped her arms around herself. What do we do, Tom? We get to Fort Bridger. Fast. Get law involved. He paused. And tonight we set watches. They agreed to rotate. Tom would take the first 4 hours, Eliza the next 4. Tom pulled out his spare revolver, a Colt pocket pistol, smaller than his main gun, but deadly enough at close range. You know how to use this. My father taught me. Rifles mostly, but I understand the principle. Good. Don't hesitate if you need it. Eliza took the gun, felt its weight. Her hand trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. I won't. That night, Tom sat watch by the dying fire. He'd positioned himself where he could see the approaches to camp from 3 directions. His Henry rifle lay across his lap, loaded and ready. His Colt rode his hip hammer thonged for quick draw. The hours passed slowly. Every sound became a potential threat. The horses shifting position, an owl calling in the distance, the wind rattling through dry brush. Around 2 in the morning, he heard something. Footsteps, careful and quiet, coming from the south. Tom's hand found his rifle finger on the trigger. He waited, barely breathing. A shape emerged from darkness. Human. Male. Moving toward camp with predatory caution. Tom lifted the rifle to his shoulder. That's far enough. The shape froze. You've got 3 seconds to identify yourself or catch a bullet. Easy, friend. The voice was educated, smooth, dangerous. Just passing through. Saw your fire. Fire's been out for 2 hours, and this ain't public road. State your business or move on. A match flared, illuminating a face. Scarred cheek, cold eyes. The face Tom had seen that first night, the man giving orders to sabotage Eliza's wagon. Vernon Pike. Name's Pike, the man said, playing innocent. Vernon Pike. Me and my boys are heading south. Meant no harm. Where's your camp? Mile north. Then go back to it. Vernon took a step closer. Tom cocked the rifle to sound loud in the quiet night. I wouldn't, Tom said softly. Vernon stopped, hands visible but relaxed. A man comfortable with violence weighing his odds. You're traveling with a woman. Mrs. Brennan, I believe. What of it? Just curious. Long way for a lady to be traveling. Dangerous country. She's got protection now. Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's good. Real good. Hate to think of anything happening to her or that little girl of yours. Accidents happen on the trail, you know. The threat was clear. Tom stood slowly, rifle still aimed. You threatening my daughter? Just stating facts. Trail's dangerous. People die. Would be a shame if... Listen careful, Tom interrupted, his voice dropping to a tone that had sent grown men running during the war. You go near my daughter, you go near Mrs. Brennan, and I will put you in the ground. That's not a threat. That's a promise, Vernon assessed him. Saw the steel in his spine, the cavalry training, the absolute certainty that Tom Caldwell would make good on his word. No need for hostility, friend, just making conversation. Conversation's over. You've got 10 seconds to be gone before I decide you're a threat and act accordingly. Vernon raised his hands in mock surrender, backing away. We're going, but Caldwell, long trail ahead. Lot can happen. He melted into darkness. Tom held position for another 20 minutes, watching the shadows. Finally convinced Pike was truly gone, he returned to the fire. Eliza emerged from the wagon. She'd been awake, he realized. Listening. Her face was pale but determined. I should go, she said. I won't put you and Maggie in danger. No. Tom, you heard him. He threatened. I heard, and my answer stands. We're in this together. But Tom moved closer, his voice urgent but quiet to not wake Maggie. Eliza, if you leave, you're dead in 2 days. They'll kill you and take that land deed and no one will ever know. Is that what you want? Is that how you honor your brother's memory? Tears streaked her face. I don't know what I want. I just know I can't live with myself if something happens to you because of me. Nothing's going to happen. We'll reach Fort Bridger in 4 days. Get the law involved. Make a plan. And if we don't make it, then we don't. But at least we tried together. That's better than dying alone. Eliza looked at him for a long moment. Then, surprising them both, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Held tight, her face pressed against his chest. Tom's arms came up, automatically holding her. She was small in his embrace, delicate feeling, but he knew the strength that lived in her. Had seen it prove itself day after day. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. They stood like that for a minute, drawing comfort from contact, from not being alone. Then Eliza stepped back, wiping her eyes. Thank you, she said, for not letting me run. Thank you for trusting me enough to stay. The rest of the night passed without incident, but neither of them slept well. They both understood now what they'd known intellectually before. This wasn't just hard travel. This was survival, and men with guns were hunting them. Fort Bridger rose from the plains like a promise kept. Wooden palisade walls, stone buildings, and American flags snapping in the wind. After 12 days of hard trail, of cold camps and constant vigilance, it looked like paradise. They arrived on November 20th, mid-afternoon. The sentry at the gate, a young private, barely old enough to shave, checked them through with minimal fuss. Inside the walls, civilization. A trading post, a blacksmith's forge, a small hotel run by a Chinese woman named Mrs. Chen, a handful of soldiers moving with purpose. Traders and travelers, maybe 20 or 30 people, total the most humans Tom and Eliza had seen since Independence Rock. Maggie pressed against Tom's side, overwhelmed by the sudden crowds. The child had grown used to silence and solitude. Their first stop was the fort surgeon. Dr. Henry Walsh proved to be a competent man in his 50s with kind eyes and steady hands. He examined them all in turn. Maggie first, healthy overall though thin, minor frostbite on her toes from the blizzard already healing. The doctor prescribed hot meals and rest. Eliza next. Walsh unwrapped her hand, carefully studying the wound. Who did this bandaging? Tom did. Walsh glanced at Tom with new respect. Professional work. You have medical training. My wife taught me what she knew. She was skilled. Walsh heard the past tense, nodded understanding. He examined the wound, testing Eliza's finger movement. It's healed remarkably well. You'll have a scar, but full function. Another week and you can stop bandaging it. Relief washed over Eliza's face. Her hand, her ability to work to right to survive. It would be fine. Finally, Tom. Walsh probed his ankle, the one he'd twisted during the river crossing, and never mentioned. Tom winced but said nothing. Sprain, not severe but not helped by you walking on it for a week. Off your feet for 2 days minimum, or you'll do permanent damage. Can't, we're leaving in 3 days. Then you're a fool, but I'll wrap it tight and give you liniment. Try to rest when you can. After the medical check, they rented a room at Mrs. Chen's hotel. 1 room, 2 beds. Tom and Maggie would share one, Eliza take the other. Proper and economical. That evening, after a hot meal that tasted like heaven, after weeks of trail food, after Maggie had fallen asleep exhausted, Tom and Eliza sat by the small fireplace in their room. For the first time in days, they could relax, could speak without watching the shadows. We have 11 days, Eliza said, to reach Boulder Creek. That's 160 miles from here. Tom did the math. 15 miles a day, every day in winter, through mountain passes. It's tight. Can we make it? If weather holds, if nothing breaks, if Pike Brothers don't cause trouble. He paused. It's possible. Eliza pulled her new shawl, the one she'd bought at the trading post to replace Tom's wife's, that she'd insisted on returning tighter around her shoulders. Tom, there's something you need to know about the claim. What? Filing it isn't enough. I talked to the land office clerk here. Under Homestead Act, one have to occupy the land, build on it, live there for 6 months before it's truly mine. Tom felt his stomach drop. 6 months in Colorado. Yes. Your brother's ranch is, you'd have to stay there, build a cabin, prove occupancy. Yes. The implications hung between them. Tom's ranch was in Montana, 2 weeks north of Boulder Creek. If Eliza had to stay in Colorado for 6 months, that meant, you'd be leaving, Eliza said quietly. After we reach Colorado, you'd go back to Montana, your ranch, your life. I could, Tom stopped. Could what, abandon his ranch for 6 months, the land he'd built, the legacy for Maggie? I could check on you, visit. It's 2 weeks each way. You can't make that trip constantly. They sat in silence, both understanding what neither wanted to say. They'd known each other less than 2 weeks, but something real had formed between them. Something that felt like it might become love, given time. But time was the one thing they didn't have. What do you want, Eliza? Tom asked. Not what you think you should do. What do you actually want? Eliza stared into the fire for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was raw. I want both. I want my brother's land secure. I want to honor his memory. But I also want... She stopped, swallowed. I want this, whatever this is between us. I want to see where it goes. I want Maggie in my life. I want to wake up next to you and not be alone anymore. Tom's heart hammered. So do I. But we can't have both. Maybe we can. Maybe I stay in Colorado with you, help you build, prove occupancy. My ranch, I've got a foreman. He can manage for 6 months. Tom, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Why would you give up 6 months for me? Tom stood, moved to crouch in front of her chair. He took her hands, feeling the calluses, the strength. Because for 3 years I've been half alive, going through motions, and then you appeared stubborn and fierce and refusing to die. And something in me woke up. He squeezed her hands. I don't know what this is between us. Don't know if it's love or just 2 broken people clinging together. But I know I want to find out. And I know I'm not ready to say goodbye. Eliza's tears fell freely now. I'm scared. What if we're wrong? What if we ruin this? Then we're wrong together, but I don't think we are. They leaned toward each other, drawn by gravity they couldn't fight. Tom's hand cupped her face thumb, wiping away tears. Eliza's fingers curled into his shirt. Their lips met, soft at first, tentative, asking permission, then deeper, certain, a declaration of intent. When they parted, both were breathing hard. Tomorrow we ride for Colorado, Tom said. Together, and we figure out the rest as we go. Together, Eliza agreed. In the other bed, Maggie slept on, innocent and dreaming. But in the morning, she'd wake to a family that was slowly, carefully knitting itself together. Outside Fort Bridger's walls, Vernon Pike sat his horse in the darkness, watching the lit window where Tom and Eliza's room glowed, his brother Silas beside him. "They're leaving tomorrow," Silas said. "Got it from the stablemen, heading for Colorado." "Let them go," Vernon said. "We'll hit them on the trail, somewhere remote. Make it look like an accident." "What about Caldwell? He's dangerous." Vernon's scarred face showed nothing. "Then we'll have to be more dangerous." They turned their horses and rode into darkness, patient and deadly. Inside the fort, Tom and Eliza sat by the fire hands, clasped, building dreams they didn't yet know would be tested by blood and winter and the worst storm in 20 years. But for this one night, they had warmth and safety and each other. And sometimes that was enough. They left Fort Bridger before dawn on November 21st, slipping out while the world still slept in darkness. Marshal Davies had warned them the night before. Pike brothers were camped a mile north watching the fort. The only advantage Tom and Eliza had was surprise a 2-hour head start before their hunters realized the prey had moved. The cold bit deep that morning, well below freezing. Stars blazed overhead with that particular brilliance that only came in winter at high altitude. Tom drove with Eliza pressed close beside him for warmth, Maggie bundled between them under layers of blankets. The horse's breath plumed white in the darkness as they followed the trail south by starlight and instinct. No one spoke. Sound carried far in the cold air, and they all understood that silence might be the difference between life and death. As dawn broke gray and reluctant over the mountains, Tom pushed the horses harder than he liked. 15 miles by mid-morning, 20 by early afternoon. The trail climbed steadily into foothills, the first fingers of the Rocky Mountains reaching out to test their resolve. Behind them, somewhere in that vast landscape, 4 men followed. Tom knew this with the certainty that came from years of being hunted and hunting in return. He felt their presence like pressure against his spine. That first day they made 30 miles, an impressive distance given the terrain and the cold. They camped in a narrow canyon, no fire-cold food eaten in silence. Tom took first watch while Eliza and Maggie huddled together for warmth in the wagon. Around midnight, Tom saw them. 4 riders, distant silhouettes against the stars, moving along a ridge half a mile back. Not trying to hide anymore, just following, patient and inevitable as death itself. The second day brought harder climbing. The trail switchbacked up mountainsides, narrow and treacherous. The horses labored their breath, coming hard steam rising from their bodies, despite the cold. Progress slowed to 25 miles, then 20. Eliza drove part of the day, giving Tom's injured ankle rest. She'd become skilled at reading the horse's needs, knowing when to push and when to ease back. Maggie sat quiet between them, sensing the tension, the urgency that drove them forward. "How much further to the line shack?" Eliza asked as they made camp that evening. Tom consulted the map by lantern light. 40 miles, day and a half if weather holds. And if it doesn't, Tom looked at the sky. Clouds were building west, thick and dark. The wind had shifted, coming now from the northwest, carrying the smell of snow. Then we might be making that shelter just in time. The third day, November 23rd, the weather turned. Temperature dropped through the morning, falling from the 20s into the teens, then lower. By noon, the first flakes began to fall. Small at first, almost delicate. Within an hour, heavy and determined. Tom pushed the horses mercilessly. They had to reach that line shack before the storm hit full force. Had to. Because if they were caught in open country, when the blizzard came, they'd die. All 3 of them frozen in the wagon, another tragedy the mountains would swallow without comment. The snow fell heavier, visibility dropped. The trail disappeared under white. Tom navigated by compass in memory and prayer, following the shape of the land, reading the way water would flow, to guess where the trail should be. 4 o'clock and the light was already failing. The storm pressed down like a physical weight. Tom's hands were numb on the reins. Eliza held Maggie tight, both of them shivering despite the blankets. Then through the swirling snow, a shape, square and man-made. The line shack. Tom nearly wept with relief. They got the horses into the lean-to structure, poor shelter, but better than nothing. Grabbed essential supplies and stumbled into the shack itself. The door hung crooked on leather hinges. Half the roof was missing. Snow had already drifted through gaps in the walls. But there was a stone fireplace. Intact. Functional. Tom's hands shook as he built the fire, fumbling with tinder and kindling. Behind him, Eliza worked to block the door with their supplies, creating a windbreak. Maggie huddled in the corner, wrapped in every blanket they owned. The fire caught. Grew. Warmth bloomed in the small space. They'd made it. Barely, but they'd made it. That night, the storm hit with full fury. Wind screamed through the gaps in the walls. Snow drove through in horizontal sheets. The temperature plummeted to 0, then below. The fire fought valiantly, but could only do so much against that cold. They huddled together, all three of them sharing body heat. Tom kept the fire fed with wood scavenged from the shack's broken furniture. Eliza rationed their food carefully. 3 days' worth, maybe 4, if they were careful. They'd need every scrap. By morning, the storm showed no signs of stopping. The second day in the line shack brought the first real crisis. Maggie woke coughing, a deep, wet sound that made Tom's blood run cold. He felt her forehead, and his worst fears were confirmed. Fever, not high yet, but rising. Just a cold, Eliza said, but her voice carried doubt. Sarah started with a cold, Tom said quietly. Then it became pneumonia. Then she died. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Eliza moved into action, pushing down her own fear. She made tea from the willow bark they'd brought, coaxing Maggie to drink despite the bitter taste. She fashioned compresses from snow, placing them on the child's forehead. She wrapped Maggie in blankets and held her close, sharing warmth, singing soft songs. Tom paced like a caged animal. All his strength, all his skills meaningless against a child's fever. He'd failed Sarah, failed their unborn son. Now he was watching it happen again with Maggie, and the helplessness threatened to break him. By afternoon, Maggie's fever had climbed to 102 degrees. She drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about her mother. Tom sat against the wall, head in hands, tears tracking through the dirt on his face. Eliza moved beside him, took his hand. She's not Sarah. And you're not alone this time. We fight this together. I can't lose her, Tom whispered. She's all I have. You won't. Look at me. Eliza gripped his chin, forced him to meet her eyes. She's my daughter too now, mine. And I'm not giving her up without a fight. The fierce claim of motherhood shocked Tom from his spiral. Eliza had known Maggie only 2 weeks, but she meant every word. What do we do, he asked. We keep her warm, keep her hydrated, and we wait. Children are stronger than we think. They worked in shifts through day and night. Tom tending fire, Eliza monitoring fever, changing compresses, coaxing medicine down Maggie's throat. Around midnight, the fever peaked at 103.5. Delirious now, thrashing, calling for the dead. Tom held her while Eliza prepared a cool bath from melted snow. Together, they lowered the child into water. Maggie screamed at the shock. The sound tore through Tom's heart. But they held firm. Sometimes you had to hurt someone to save them. 10 minutes. Out. Dried quickly. Wrapped in blankets. Her fever dropped to 102. Small victory, but victory. Sleep, Eliza ordered Tom. You're no good to her, exhausted. I'll watch. Tom wanted to argue, but exhaustion had him in its grip. He lay down beside Maggie, one hand on her chest, feeling the rise and fall of breathing. Fell into sleep so deep it was like drowning. He woke to weak morning light and a hand shaking his shoulder. Eliza's face swam into focus and she was smiling. Feel her forehead. Tom reached out with trembling fingers. Cool. Not cold, but cool. Normal. The fever had broken. Maggie opened her eyes, focused on her father. Papa, I'm thirsty. Tom laughed, the sound breaking into a sob. That's my girl. That's my strong girl. They gave her water. She drank and slept again, but this time it was healing sleep, not the unconsciousness of fever. Eliza and Tom sat together by the dying fire, both exhausted beyond words. You saved her, Tom said. We pulled her through, Eliza corrected softly. Together. Tom pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you, he whispered. I don't know when it happened, but I love you. Eliza's arms came around him, holding tight. I love you too. God help me, I do. They kissed then, deep and desperate and grateful. A kiss that tasted of terror survived and hope reborn. When they parted, both were crying. Marry me, Tom said. Not someday, soon, as soon as we reach Boulder Creek. Marry me and be Maggie's mother and let us be a family. Yes, Eliza said without hesitation. Yes. They held each other while Maggie slept and the storm raged on outside and made plans for a future they'd fight to claim. The crisis wasn't over. The next morning brought new disaster. The firewood was gone. They'd burned through everything inside the shack. If they wanted to stay warm, Tom needed to venture out to the lean-to where they'd stashed extra lumber. The storm had eased slightly, still snowing but not the whiteout conditions of the previous day. Tom could see maybe 30 feet. Enough. He tied a rope around his waist, secured the other end to a support beam, ventured into the storm. The cold hit like a fist. The wind tried to push him down. Snow drove into his face, blinding. But he pushed forward, following the rope, feeling his way. The lean-to was 50 feet from the shack. Should have been easy, but the snow had drifted deep, creating hidden valleys and slopes. Tom took a step, and his boot found nothing. He plunged into a drift ankle, twisting viciously as he went down. Pain exploded white-hot through his leg. The same ankle he'd injured at the river crossing, now wrenched badly, possibly broken. Tom bit down on a scream. Couldn't let Maggie hear. Couldn't scare her. He tried to stand. His ankle wouldn't take weight. He went down again, face first into snow. For a moment, panic threatened. He was injured in a storm 50 feet from shelter. This was how people died on the frontier. Stupid accidents. Bad luck. Then training kicked in. Cavalry didn't panic. Cavalry assessed and adapted. He couldn't walk. Fine. He'd crawl. Tom crawled. 50 feet became 50 miles of agony. Cold. Pain. Rope in frozen hands. The shack door materialized. Eliza pulled him inside. He collapsed by the fire leg, screaming. Eliza unwrapped his boot. The ankle was already swelling purple and hot. She pressed carefully and Tom hissed in pain. Might be broken, she said. Definitely severe sprain. She worked with the same focused competence he'd shown when treating her hand weeks before. Wrapped the ankle tight in strips torn from her petticoat. Fashioned a splint from a broken board and leather ties. Made a crutch from a thick branch and rags. When she finished, she sat back, and Tom saw fear in her eyes. We're trapped, she said quietly. You can't walk. Maggie's weak from fever. I can't carry you both, and I can't drive the wagon alone through this. Tom knew she was right. They'd survived the immediate crises, but now they were stuck. 3 people in a collapsing shack with dwindling supplies and no way out. How much food left, he asked. If we're careful, 2 days, maybe 3. 2 days. The storm showed no signs of stopping. They could be stuck here for a week. They were going to die. The thought came unbidden but certain. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. They'd freeze or starve, and no one would find them until spring when their bodies thawed. Tom looked at Maggie, sleeping peacefully, her fever finally broken. Looked at Eliza, this woman he'd known less than a month but loved with everything in him. He'd saved Eliza from freezing. She'd saved Maggie from fever. Now they'd all die together. There was poetry in that, he supposed. Bitter poetry, but poetry nonetheless. That night, with the last log burning in the fireplace, with the cold pressing in from all sides, they huddled together. All 3 of them wrapped in Sarah's shawl, and Eliza's new one, the fabrics mingling, 2 women's work protecting the family they'd formed. I'm sorry, Tom said. I got you into this, both of you. If you'd... Stop, Eliza interrupted firmly. I chose this, chose you, chose us. And if we die tomorrow, at least I'll die loved. That's more than I had 3 weeks ago. Mama, Maggie's small voice, she'd started calling Eliza that during the fever. Are we going to die? Eliza pulled the child close. No, sweetheart, we're going to survive. We're going to reach Colorado and file that claim and build a cabin and live there and be a family. All of us, together. Promise. I promise. It was a lie, probably, but sometimes lies were kinder than truth. Tom held them both, feeling their warmth, their life. If these were his last hours, at least he'd spend them like this. Not alone, not cold inside, but surrounded by love. He closed his eyes and prayed to a God he'd stopped believing in 3 years ago. Please, if you're listening, if you care, save them. Take me if you need payment, but save them. The fire burned down to coals. The cold pressed closer. And outside, the storm raged on, indifferent to human suffering, beautiful and terrible, and utterly without mercy. Tom woke to silence. After days of wind screaming through gaps, the absence of sound was shocking. He opened his eyes. Gray light filtered through holes in the roof. Morning. The storm had stopped. He sat up carefully, his ankle protesting. Eliza and Maggie still slept tangled together under layers of fabric, both breathing steady, both alive. They'd survived the night. Tom pulled himself to the door using his makeshift crutch, pushed it open. The world was transformed. Snow blanketed everything deep and pristine. The sky showed patches of blue between breaking clouds. Weak sunlight painted the peaks gold. Beautiful. Deadly. But the storm was over. Behind him, Eliza stirred, opened her eyes. Tom Yarn. Storm broke. She was beside him in an instant, looking out at the changed world. Hope and despair warred on her face. The storm was over, but they still had no food, no way to travel. No riders, Tom said. Eliza followed his pointing finger. There on the ridge, half a mile distant, multiple horses moving toward them. Terror gripped her. Pike brothers. Maybe, or maybe help. Tom studied the approaching group. More than 4. 6 horses, maybe 7. Too many for just Pike brothers. Get my rifle. Eliza grabbed the Henry rifle, checked the load, handed it to Tom. He rested it across his lap, finger on the trigger, and waited. The riders came closer, close enough to see details. Men in heavy coats, one wearing a tin star that caught the sunlight. A lawman, Tom's breath released in a rush. That's Sheriff Morgan from Boulder Creek. The marshal must have sent word like he promised. The riders approached the shack. Sheriff Morgan dismounted, a hard-faced man in his late 40s, with eyes that had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Brennan. Here, Tom called. Morgan approached, taking in the collapsed shack, the visible signs of their struggle. Marshal Davies sent a rider. Said you'd need help. Looks like he was right. How'd you find us? Tracked you from Fort Bridger. Would have been here sooner, but the storm held us up. He glanced past Tom to where Eliza and Maggie stood. Everyone all right? Barely. We need food, warm shelter, and a doctor. Got all 3 in Boulder Creek. Can you travel? Tom looked at his injured ankle, at Maggie, still weak from fever, at Eliza, exhausted beyond measure. Don't have much choice. We've got 5 days to file that claim or lose it. Morgan nodded. Then let's move. We've got pack horses for supplies, and we can make a travois for you if needed. Just get us there, Tom said. We'll figure out the rest. It took 2 hours to break camp and load up. Morgan's men were efficient and helpful. They fashioned a comfortable spot in the wagon bed where Tom could ride with his leg elevated. Maggie and Eliza rode on the bench, one of Morgan's deputies driving. As they pulled away from the line shack, Tom took one last look at the place that had nearly become their tomb. 3 people had entered, desperate and broken. 3 people were leaving all even whole and together. Sometimes survival was its own kind of victory. The ride to Boulder Creek took 3 days. They moved slowly, carefully, mindful of injuries and exhaustion. Morgan's men hunted fresh game, and the smell of roasting venison was the most beautiful thing Tom had experienced in weeks. On the second night, Morgan rode beside the wagon, talking with Tom and Eliza. About Pike brothers, the sheriff said. We arrested them. Tom sat up straighter. Week ago, they got careless, made threats within earshot of a federal marshal. That gave us cause. When we searched their camp, we found evidence. Letters from Arthur Grayson with explicit instructions. References to Michael Brennan's death. Eliza gripped Tom's hand. They killed my brother. We believe so. Can't prove it yet, but we will. Grayson singing like a bird to save his own neck. Named Pike brothers as his enforcers. So we're safe, Eliza asked. From them, yes. Grayson's business partners might cause trouble later, but for now, the immediate threat is gone. Tom felt tension he'd carried for weeks drain away. Safe. They were actually safe. That night around the campfire, Eliza leaned against Tom's shoulder. Maggie slept in her lap, color returning to the child's cheeks, strength rebuilding day by day. 5 more days, Eliza said softly. Then we file the claim. And then we start building, Tom added. Cabin first, then barn, then whatever else we need. And your ranch in Montana. I'll check on it come spring, bring my foreman down to meet you. Maybe we combine operations eventually. But for now, home is wherever you are. Eliza tilted her head to look at him. You mean that every word? She kissed him softly. Then take me home, Tom Caldwell. Take us all home. They reached Boulder Creek on November 30th mid-afternoon. The town was small, maybe 200 souls clustered in a valley where the creek Morgan had mentioned ran fast and clear. Mountains rose on three sides, protective and imposing. The land office was a small building near the town center. Mr. Winters, the clerk, was a precise man in his 60s who examined every document with painful slowness. Eliza presented her papers. Michael Brennan's death certificate, the will naming her sole heir, the original homestead claim filed in 1873, proof of relationship from the family Bible she'd carried all this way. Winters reviewed each document, checked signatures, verified stamps. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, he nodded, dipped his pen in ink, wrote in careful script across an official certificate. Eleanor Brennan Caldwell, widow, hereby claims 160 acres under Homestead Act of 1862, Boulder Creek Section 12, water rights included. Filed November 30th, 1876. He signed it, stamped it, handed it to Eliza. Congratulations, Mrs. Caldwell. You're a landowner. Eliza held the certificate, hands trembling. 2 years of loss and struggle. 800 miles traveled alone. Infection and fever and near freezing. All of it culminating in this single piece of paper. She looked at Tom, tears streaming. I did it. Michael's legacy is safe. Tom wrapped his arm around her waist, supporting her as his ankle still couldn't fully bear weight. You did it, and now we build on it. Outside the land office, Eliza stood in the afternoon sun looking at her certificate. Then she looked at Tom and Maggie, beside her this family she'd found in the wilderness. Thank you, she said, for not letting me die alone on that trail. Tom pulled her close. Thank you for being stubborn enough to survive. Maggie tugged on both their hands. Can we see our land now? Tom and Eliza exchanged glances. Our land, our family, our future. Yeah, Bird, Tom said. Let's go home. Sheriff Morgan provided horses and an escort. They rode out to Section 12, following the creek upstream into the foothills. The land revealed itself in stages. First, the creek itself running clear and cold, lined with cottonwoods. Then meadows flat and fertile, perfect for crops and grazing. Rising ground to the south where a cabin could sit with views of the valley and protection from north winds. Timber on the higher slopes for building and firewood. It was beautiful, raw and wild, but beautiful. Eliza dismounted, walked to the creek, knelt and touched the water. This water, the one thing her brother had died defending. The resource that would sustain them and any neighbors who settled nearby. I wish you could see this, Michael, she whispered. I wish you could know it was worth it. Tom came to stand beside her. He didn't interrupt her moment, just waited, supporting her in silence. Finally, Eliza stood, turned to face him. We should marry tomorrow. Tom blinked, surprised. Tomorrow. Why wait? We've wasted enough time already. Tom smiled, slow and warm. Tomorrow, then. They married in the small church in Boulder Creek the next morning, December 1st. Reverend Campbell officiated, a kind man who asked no questions about their brief courtship. Eliza wore her cleanest dress and wildflowers in her hair that Maggie had picked. Tom wore his one good shirt, shaved and nervous. Maggie stood between them, holding both their hands. The ceremony was simple. No grand gestures or lengthy vows. Just two people promising to stand together, to build together, to face whatever came together. Do you, Thomas, take Eleanor to be your wife? Tom looked at Eliza, at this fierce, stubborn woman who'd refused his help and then became his everything. Every day for the rest of my life. Do you, Eleanor, take Thomas to be your husband? Eliza smiled through tears. I do. I take him and Maggie both. I take this family. I take this future. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. Tom kissed Eliza while Maggie cheered, and the handful of townfolk who'd gathered clapped. It wasn't a grand wedding, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. That evening in the small room they'd rented while they built their cabin, Tom and Eliza lay together as husband and wife. Maggie slept in the other bed, exhausted from excitement. Are you happy? Tom asked softly. Eliza pressed closer to him. Happier than I've been in years, maybe happier than I've ever been. Even though we nearly died getting here. Especially because of that. It means we chose this, chose each other. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Tom kissed her forehead. I love you, Mrs. Caldwell. I love you too, Mr. Caldwell. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, safe and warm and home at last. The story returns to where it began. Montana Ranch, 1906. Tom at 65 telling his grandson James about the winter of 1876. And that's how I met your grandmother, Tom finished. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the room. James sat transfixed. And you really almost died, all of you. More than once, but we didn't. We survived. Built that cabin in Boulder Creek, proved occupancy for 6 months. Eventually combined my Montana ranch with her Colorado land. Raised 3 children there. Your mother Maggie, your Uncle David, your Aunt Sarah. And Grandma Eliza? When did she die? Tom's expression softened with remembered pain. 5 years ago. Pneumonia, same as my first wife. But we had 30 good years together, raised a family, built a legacy. He held up the shawl, 2 patterns intertwined. She added her stitching to this, right next to Sarah's. Said they were both my wives, both Maggie's mothers, both part of our family. Did Mom remember her real mother? Maggie loved both her mothers. Sarah gave her life. Eliza gave her love and care and teaching. Both were real. James walked to the window. Outside, snow continued to fall on the ranch that 4 generations of Caldwells had built. Grandpa, why did you tell me this story? Tom rose, joints creaking, and joined his grandson at the window. Because you need to understand where you come from. Your grandmother Eliza was the most stubborn woman I ever met. Refused help even when she was dying. But she learned something important. What? That strength isn't doing everything alone. It's knowing when to accept help, when to let people in, when to build something bigger than yourself. He placed the shawl around James's shoulders. This is yours now. Someday when you find someone worth fighting for, you'll understand why it matters. James touched the interwoven patterns, feeling the history in every stitch. I wish I'd known her better. You knew her well enough. She loved you fierce, that grandmother of yours, every moment she had with you. They stood together at the window, old man and young boy, looking out at land that had been bought with blood and stubbornness and love that refused to quit. In the distance, lights glowed from other cabins. Maggie's home where she lived with her husband, David's ranch to the east, Sarah's homestead to the south. A family sprawling across the landscape, roots dug deep into hard soil. The stubborn heart breaks hardest, Tom said softly, almost to himself. But when it heals, it's stronger than before. Eleanor taught me that, and I spent 30 years loving her for it. James looked up at his grandfather. Did you ever regret it? Helping her that first day? Getting involved? Tom smiled, thinking of that November afternoon in 1876. A dying woman collapsed by a wagon wheel. A choice to offer help when it wasn't wanted. A decision that changed everything. Not for 1 second. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, her and Maggie and all the life we built together. He turned from the window, old and tired, but content. That's the lesson, boy. When you find someone worth saving, you save them. Even if they don't want it, even if it's hard, even if it nearly kills you. Because sometimes the best things in life are the ones we have to fight for. James nodded, not fully understanding yet, but storing the words away for when he would. Tom returned to his chair by the fire, closed his eyes, and in the darkness behind his lids, he saw her. Eliza at 30, fierce and wounded and beautiful. Eliza at 40, strong and laughing. Eliza at 50, gray threading her hair, but eyes still bright. Eliza at 60, still stubborn, still his. I'm coming, Eleanor, he whispered to the empty room. Not yet, but soon. Wait for me. Outside, the snow fell soft and silent on a land that had been wild once but was wild no longer. Tamed by the hands of people who'd refused to quit. Built by the stubborn hearts that kept beating even when beating hurt. And somewhere in the mountains between Montana and Colorado, a small line shack still stood, half collapsed, slowly returning to the earth. The place where 3 people had nearly died but chose instead to live. The place where a family was born. The snow covered it now, gentle and forgiving, turning tragedy into memory, pain into story of survival, into legend. And in a warm ranch house, an old man slept by the fire, dreaming of a stubborn woman who taught him that the strongest thing you could do was let someone love you, even when you didn't think you deserved it. especially then.